The final stage has begun. IDF ground forces finally enter Gaza City, Hamas's last stronghold, as Gazans flee in droves despite Hamas's threats and actual firing on them. With U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio reaffirming unbreakable bonds while tensions simmer over strategy, is this the endgame Hamas feared? Let's dive in.
Shalom, I'm Mark Regev, and welcome to another episode of Israel Undiplomatic. And I'm, as per usual, here with my co-host, Ruthie Blum.
Hello, Mark. We got a lot to discuss as usual this week, and I'm going to begin by reminding you and the viewers that last episode was just in the wake of Israel's attack on Hamas leaders in Doha, Qatar. And then we said that it wasn't clear. We didn't know what would be by the following week. And there seems to be a lot of fog surrounding this. Some say we didn't manage to kill any of them. Some say, I don't know, they've been incognito since then, and maybe we did and maybe we didn't. But with the Israeli prime minister and others saying, look, the whole point of this was to instill fear in Hamas that it's not safe anywhere. So whether or not we actually killed them is less relevant than the message we conveyed. But what's also interesting is that afterwards, President Trump expressed disappointment, or he was annoyed that Israel did this, and said, you better be careful. Qatar is America's great ally, etc. And of course, all the left and the opposition said, oh, there we go again, Netanyahu causing a rift with Washington. Lo and behold, Rubio arrives in Israel and gives us such a warm bath. So I'd like you to address that before we go further.
So on a number of the points you raised, the issue is the strike against the Hamas leadership in Qatar. So there were about 5-6 people, on our target list. And except for one who did an interview for Al Jazeera, Hamas's favored station, of course, for obvious reasons, the rest we haven't heard of. And so there's no confirmation or information or evidence that they're dead. But the contrary is also true. There's no evidence, confirmation that they're alive. And it's like a week since the strike, and the fact that we don't have pictures of the other people, we've only seen one of them, raises questions. Maybe they're badly injured. Maybe they are dead. If they are alive, you think Hamas would be parading them. So this gives me, I'm always cautious, but this gives me a cautious optimism that maybe we did actually hit some of the people we attended to, and maybe some of them are either very badly injured or dead, which means the operation, once again, it's a week since the operation, and except for one, we haven't seen any of them on TV, on camera, talking. Very interesting, I think. On the issue of U.S.-Israel relations, it's difficult. We know that Qatar has this special relationship with the United States of America. Qatar hosts this largest U.S. base in the region. I think they say 10,000 U.S. personnel work at this base. Once again, on Qatari soil. We know that President Trump visited there earlier this year. It was one of the 3 Arab countries he chose to visit, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. There's the story of the plane. Yes, they gave him as a present a potential Air Force One, and apparently the plane has been delivered and it's now going through, preparation so it can actually serve the president. And so he's obviously got a relationship there. The United States historically has had a relationship with Qatar. Now, we know that Qatar plays both sides of the field. This is the same Qatar that, rolls out the red carpet for Trump, totally funds Al Jazeera, which puts out all this anti-Israel and anti-American propaganda, that they host Hamas and other radical terrorist groups that have been fighting the West for years, not only Israel, the West. And so there's a relationship there, and maybe when Trump says he wasn't, happy with the Israeli strike on Hamas in Qatar, maybe he really wasn't so happy about it. I don't know.
Okay, so first of all, I know, as usual, you use this very mild language. First of all, about the plane, I'm not sure. I actually heard it hadn't been delivered yet, but I don't know. Second of all, Qatar is not playing both sides of the fence. Yeah, no, it wants American money. It's playing one side, okay? It's a terrorist state acting as an ATM. It funds all the radical movements around the globe. It funds universities in America that radicalize the students. That's one of the reasons that we believe what happened to Charlie Kirk last Wednesday happened, because these students are radicalized, and it's Qatari money. Qatar funds, and also Qatar likes to try to buy influence everywhere, and that it imposed itself as a mediator in the hostage negotiations was the most ridiculous of all, because it was actually helping Hamas leaders, siding with Hamas leaders. The only thing it really wanted was to help Hamas get ceasefires so it could rearm, regroup, etc. Qatar has no redeeming qualities, and if the United States feels, yes, the United States has an air base there, that's true. But my issue with it was not to talk about Qatar and whether it was legitimate for us to do that. It was totally legitimate. Is whether the naysayers that are all gleeful every time they believe that the Trump administration is done with Israel, is angry at Netanyahu, is angry at Israel, and it always proves to be false. And I think there's no accident that Marco Rubio visited, and not only did he visit, so he went to the Western Wall with a kippah on his head with Prime Minister Netanyahu and Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee, and they prayed at the Western Wall. Rubio also, what he did is he helped inaugurate the Pilgrim's Path in eastern Jerusalem. The Palestinian Authority went ballistic over this, saying, oh, you're just helping the Jewish settlers and all that. Point is, it was an important message. Furthermore, Rubio also said, Hamas can't stay in power. All the hostages have to be returned. He never said for a moment that what Israel is the ground invasion is a bad idea. And while President Trump has said, come on, end the war quickly, let's get this over with, what he meant was win the war. And he again reiterated that he issued another warning to Hamas. If you use those hostages as human shields, which of course they have been the whole time, but he meant that Hamas had actually threatened to bring the hostages out of the tunnels and into open air, to use them literally as human shields during Israel's bombing and ground incursion. And Trump said, you better not do it, and all hell to pay. I mean, I know it's one of those threats, but the point is, it shows where his sentiments lie. It is not true that there is a rift between Washington and Jerusalem, not by a long shot, or even by a short one.
So you said at the beginning of your remarks then, you said, you believed Israel's attack on Hamas in Qatar was legitimate, and I agree with that. In fact, for a change, we can actually quote a UN Security Council resolution. I think it was 2-3 weeks after 9/11, back in 2001, after America was attacked by terrorists, the UN Security Council resolution passed a resolution saying countries are not allowed to host or harbor or give sanctuary to terrorists. Now, no one except for the crazies says that Hamas is not a terrorist organization. Even the EU has declared Hamas a terrorist organization, yes. And Japan, Australia, Canada, America, of course, Israel, of course, the world has declared Hamas a terrorist organization, and somehow it's forgotten, right? Qatar is acceptable that they host a terrorist group. And I think people need to think about that for a minute. Is there a one standard for everyone and there's a different standard for Israel? What would other countries be doing if terrorists were coming from there, being, given hostage? How would they respond? And I think that's a question we need to ask. You asked, and rightly, you said there's no rift between Israel and the United States. I'd put it this way. Let's presume, for argument's sake, that President Trump wasn't 100% happy with our strike on Qatar. He might not have been happy because we didn't kill them, right? Well, pay the price and not get the job done, so to speak. And he might have had a serious concern about, I don't know, he wants to keep good relations with that Gulf kingdom which has all that money and so forth. And from an American perspective, maybe that's legitimate. But I would look at it this way: the strength of the U.S.-Israel relationship is so strong, is so robust, that we can deal with the bumps in the road in any relationship, in relationship between people, in relationship between countries. You can have bumps on the road, even in the best relationships. And how do you navigate them when they happen? That is, I think, the test of the strength of a relationship. And on the assumption that there was a bump in the road, that the Americans were disappointed or upset, or they thought it wasn't healthy or useful, that we attacked Hamas in Qatar. On that assumption, once again, I don't know for a fact that that's not true. I don't know what happened behind the doors when Netanyahu was speaking quietly to Trump what's being decided. But on the assumption that the Americans didn't think it was a good thing, the Rubio visit showed that the relationship is strong enough, once again, to deal with the bumps along the road when you actually have one.
Well, and it was a clear message to everybody in the world when Rubio came. And now he, as far as I know today, or as soon as he left Israel, he was going to Qatar. And hopefully to threaten them that they need to pressure Hamas about the hostages, etc. But I just want to correct one thing. You're absolutely right that there's a robust relationship. But when the Biden administration was in power, it wasn't so robust. And this is what I want to say about the rest of the world. When you said, what would these other countries, Canada and European countries, what would they do? Well, I'll tell you, it all depends on whether they have a leftist government in power. It's not what those countries would do. It all depends who's in power. We see that also with the Israeli left. The Israeli left, like the left-wing governments of Australia, Canada, the UK, Ireland, well, Ireland is part of the UK, but whatever, those governments are, I'm not so sure what they would do. How do we know that? Because they appease terrorism in their own borders. They are, the point is, at the moment, I don't see the world as divided in the way you do. Look at these countries, what would they do? We know what they would do depending on who's in power. And the same thing about Israel, may I say. If we had a left-wing government in power right now, I shudder to think what would have happened. I'm sure Hamas would still be in power and we would have made terrible deals as they always do. My point is, it's not the countries. It depends who's leading them. And we're seeing now, I want to say, when we saw the demonstration last week, the day after Charlie Kirk's assassination, there was a huge demonstration in the UK. And it was a patriotic demonstration. It was against wokeism. It was, and of course they took the opportunity also to commemorate Charlie Kirk, even though that wasn't the purpose of that demonstration. And we are seeing that in more and more countries, and we see that from responses from our viewers as well on YouTube, that many of those publics, like the Israeli public, make no mistake, I'd like to just make this clear. We see former prime ministers, we see the Israeli left going on CNN and Al Jazeera and the BBC and saying all kinds of things that the Arab press immediately quotes. That is not the majority of the Israeli public or the army. It is absolutely not. And we have to remember that.
So I want to disagree with what you said on a number of areas. Area number one, you talked about the Israeli left appeasing terrorism. So I would remind you that it was a Labour Prime Minister, Golda Meir, who sent the Mossad after the 1972 Munich massacre and gave instructions that all the terrorists involved would be eliminated. It was another Israeli Labour Prime Minister, Yitzhak Rabin, who, after the Entebbe hijacking and so forth, sent the special forces of Israel to Entebbe, a very risky operation. In the end, it was successful, yes, to free the hostages. But the idea is that traditionally, people like Golda Meir, Yitzhak Rabin, the founding generation of Israel, that labor group. Let me finish my point. Don't interrupt straight away. You can do it later. But that was very, very strong. Even on this current operation, the opposition started attacking when it appeared it didn't go well. But on the day of the operation, the leaders of the main parties, left of center parties in Israel, they were embracing the operation, saying Hamas deserved it. Only when they saw that the government didn't get it, then they started doing their job as parliamentary opposition and telling us all why the government made a mistake, right? So I think you should be more nuanced in the way that you look at this. As to the world, I think there's a sad thing that we've spoken about on our show on Israel Undiplomatic in the past, that you have mainstream left of center parties, like the Liberals in Canada, like the Labour Party in Britain, like the Labour Party in Australia. Macron is a bit different because he's sort of, I don't know, let's leave France out of it for a moment, yes? But in all those parties, the left, the more progressive left, the more hard left, has adopted the issue of Palestine as some sort of, holy grail. And then they appease their left-wing supporters by doing what they do. And I think that's part of politics. It's true with the Democrats in America too, unfortunately. And so that's just a fact of life, unfortunately. It doesn't mean that these countries are necessarily soft on terrorism. I think I know that political leaders in these countries will say all sorts of things, but the intelligence and counterterrorism relationship between Israel and these countries tends to be very, very good. And the last point about the demonstrations in Britain. So you're right. There are a lot of just patriotic Brits going to these demonstrations, but there's no doubt that there are also some undesirable National Front, ex-National Front types who have sort of got a sympathy with the old anti-Semitic right is also there. And I think that's one of the tragedies of the situation of British Jews. Because on one hand, you've got these people marching with Palestinian flags, saying from the river to the sea and, attacking Zionists and meaning also the British Jewish community, and at the same time the counter demonstrations to say that they're totally immune of this sort of anti-Jewish feeling. I think that's something that still has to be checked.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. But listen, when you bring up Golda Meir, when you talk about historical facts in this respect, you're absolutely right. But let's not forget that's when they were in power and they didn't, they were patriots. The Democratic Party used to be a patriotic party in America. Things have changed, okay? Largely, by the way, thanks to Qatar and its money that it spends in universities all over the world, okay? That's no longer true. You no longer have loyal opposition. And in Israel, it's getting very disloyal. And I don't mean that they didn't agree with our initial entering Gaza or because after what happened on October 7th. This is not the same. First of all, there is no more Labor Party in Israel. It died because it became so radical and everything. There is no more labor. You're talking about, you say mainstream. And you say, well, yes, and they're trying to appease their left-wing, radicals. Right. Okay, well, if that's what you do, then what you are is no longer mainstream. You are radical. And you're absolutely right that there are some right-wing anti-Semites in America as well who've kind of, it's amazing how they've come full circle to join the radical left. But they're really still fringe. I hope they remain fringe. Okay, we don't know. We don't know about that. It's very worrisome. But at the moment, the real issue is on the left, not on the right. Okay, at the moment, things change in history. And the Democratic Party in America is no longer a loyal, patriotic party. I'm sorry. It could change again. At the moment, no, the radicals have taken it over. And if you want to tell me, you say, well, France is special. No. And I'm sorry, Britain, Australia, they are going to the dark side. And they do appease anybody who says when they say pro-Palestinian, that's just a euphemism for anti-Israel. And I won't even go into the anti-Semitic aspects of it. These people are living in a universe where they don't understand that the side they support right now and the side they're defending would kill them as soon as look at them, and does at any opportunity. So that's it. So I'm just saying, let's be clear about that. It's not what those countries would do. It depends who's leading them.
Can I also say something about the Israeli right, the Likud? Because historically, Likud governments, Likud coalition governments have been involved in deals to release terrorists that some people would argue have been overly generous and maybe encouraged more hostage taking. There was the big deal with, I think Shamir was in the government at the time of Ahmed Jibril in the 1980s. There was Sharon, as a Likud prime minister, did a deal to bring back Tenenbaum and other people. There was, most famously, recently, the Gilad Shalit under Netanyahu, where for one soldier we released 1,000 terrorists, including Sinwar, who orchestrated the attacks of October 7th. And so I think, Ruthie, to be intellectually honest, you can't just say this is a left or right thing. When Netanyahu did the deal on Gilad Shalit, and why he did it, we can have a separate discussion. But there was overwhelming public support at the time. Maybe today people are more critical because they look back with maybe additional information. But at the time, maybe because of the media, maybe because of a very effective public relations campaign by the people behind the Gilad Shalit, free Gilad Shalit, almost at any price movement, yes? So I think it's not, I think it's too easy to say this is just a simple left-right divide.
Well, I agree with you that it's not a simple left-right divide, and maybe we need other words for it. Maybe what I would call it is, the patriots versus the non-patriots in all these Western countries.
No, but hang on. With that, I'm going to jump in here. Shamir, yeah, and Sharon and Netanyahu, when they did these deals, you're not saying they weren't patriots.
No. Wait a minute. First of all, I was very critical of that deal, okay? And you're right. There was pressure on Netanyahu. And again, you're talking about things that are more than a decade old and some of them 2 decades old. No, I'm talking about now. You're absolutely right that it doesn't always go on the left-right divide. But I will say one thing. It also is true that when a country has to go to war or do things that the West doesn't like to do, all right, the West just wants peace and wants to have good meals and enjoy, which we all do. Okay, Israel too. We just want peace and be able to make a living and all that stuff. The thing is that the right has always been more of a loyal opposition in Israel, so that if it needs be to go to do anything like that, the right-wing opposition was supportive of it. And so we always used to say in Israel, if you need to make peace, you want a right-wing government because the opposition will have to support it. And if you need to make war, you need a right-wing opposition. But things have shifted. And the reason they've shifted, and I'm not talking about specifically politics or war, I'm talking about a mind frame that is happening all over the West and in Israel, at the universities and in high schools. There is a wokeism that has taken over, and that has come from both Iranian influence and Qatari influence. Why is that so funny? Because those Islamists, do you think they support gay rights or transgender, or do you think they support any of the liberal and left-wing causes? No. They don't. They want to infect the West with a disease. And by the way, it's right out of the Marxist playbook, the Stalinism, that what you do is you infect the family, you infect the West, and you bring it down that way. And the trouble is that we've been just brainwashed into it. It's all over television, movies. You saw the Emmy Awards in America. They were disgusting. The woman who won the Emmy Award, not only did she say, oh, go Palestine and all kinds of things, she was wearing a pin that was representative of the massacre in Ramallah of 2 innocent Israeli guys who they took a wrong turn and they ended up in Ramallah and they were lynched, and the terrorists held up bloody hands to show that they had just ripped them limb from limb. People are wearing a pin with that bloody palm and the Emmys Robert De Niro got up and he said, I just would like to say F Trump. And the whole audience cheered. And Palestine, from the river to the sea, it's so vile. These are people in Hollywood that the people they support think of them as vile and disgusting. It's so ironic, and they don't realize it. And I'm talking about that. And I'm not talking about a right-wing politician and another politician. I'm talking about academics and the arts. Culture has completely been bought. That is so powerful.
First of all, you agree there's a problem in civil society, in left-wing progressive groups, as I said a moment ago, that the issue of Palestine has become the Holy Grail. It's become like religion. You can't argue the facts anymore. It's all a matter of, mythology and this, and Israel is the bad guy. And even when the Palestinians do the most atrocious, things like they did on October 7th, and even before, what has Israel done to the Palestinians that made them such, bloody crazy idiots, right? That it's always Israel's fault, and it's hard to deal with. It's across culture. It's part of the academic vibe. It's there. But if we go back to what happened this week on the political frame, I mean, anyone who was hoping and praying for an Israel-US rift, you just had to watch the press conference between Netanyahu and Rubio to see that that's clearly not the place. And it's very interesting because Rubio was asked by journalists, he was given an opportunity to criticize or condemn, and he made an effort to show exactly, to present the other side. And he left here for Doha, and the day after he left, we went into Gaza City, and we've started this military operation against what the government is calling the last strong Hamas stronghold inside Gaza. And this is going to be a difficult operation, but maybe necessary. I mean, I think, and I could be wrong, Netanyahu would have been preferred to go with a Witkoff deal had Hamas accepted it. He'd be preferred. He went public. He said, I supported the Trump proposals for a ceasefire and end of war. But Hamas, through their behavior, I think have given Israel no choice. Israel has to go in and finish the job. If suddenly Hamas is open to some sort of ceasefire, I think Israel should consider that very seriously, yes, because we shouldn't be on automatic pilot. But Hamas up to now has said no to any solution, any diplomatic solution, release the hostages, end the war. They've given us no choice. We have to go in, and unless something changes, we have to go in there and finish the job with the military.
Right. And more importantly, look, whatever, it all depends what you call a deal. Netanyahu has supported deals that were problematic, although most of them saw the release of hostages, and all of us were thrilled. By the way, in the Gilad Shalit deal, I was against the deal, but when he was returned to Israel, I wept along with the rest of the country, because we all want to see innocent people returned from the captivity under those barbarian murderers. Of course. Okay. But so it's hard to be against a deal that sees the release of innocent people. And it was tricky. And I know that's why Netanyahu agreed to all those deals. But what he hasn't agreed to, thank God, because, I was worried that he was going to end up capitulating, hasn't agreed to, is leaving Hamas in power and not getting back all the hostages. Hamas wasn't going to do that. And the United States said again and again, you can't be in power. And by the way, the United States is not pressing for a Palestinian state either with the Palestinian Authority. Because, I know you don't think Fatah is as bad as Hamas. We disagree on that. That's for another program. But there is no pressure in that respect. And on the contrary, the fact that Rubio inaugurated the Pilgrim's Path was another message. These are messages that America is conveying, and has not said, for example, that annexing for Israel to finally extend its sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. They've been sometimes, and maybe not this moment or whatever, they're not against it at all. And we can hear Ambassador Huckabee being quite supportive of that and visiting communities in Judea and Samaria. Again, the question of what's going on now is that, as Netanyahu has said again and again and again, we have to have total victory. We have to get the hostages back. We have to destroy Hamas, get them out of there, help any Gazan who wants to leave Gaza to do so, no thanks to their Arab brethren who do a lot of moralizing, haven't helped a single Palestinian from Gaza. So right now, what we need to do and what we're doing is aiming at victory, as Netanyahu has said for 2 years now.
So we're running to the end of our time, and I wanted to pick up something that the Secretary of State said, that Rubio said when he was standing next to Netanyahu in the press conference. He stressed, I think twice or three times, that ending Hamas rule over Gaza isn't just good for Israel. He said that's what the Palestinians need too, that the people of Gaza I think his words said, deserve a better future. And they can't have a better future under Hamas, because as long as Hamas is in power, so Gaza's like the Taliban, right? Gaza is condemned to this sort of dark age where jihad and the holy struggle against Israel and terrorism is prioritized, and the interests of the actual, the economic and social interests of the people of Gaza is ignored. And I think people need to understand that an Israeli victory, and what is Israeli victory? Israeli victory means that Hamas no longer owns Gaza, that Gaza is demilitarized, and that we get all our hostages back, right? That's what Israeli victory is all about. That actually is good for Israel, but that's actually very good for Palestinians in Gaza too, because it gives them a possibility. I underline the word possibility. I don't know what is going to happen. It gives them the possibility to build better lives for their future and for their families. If they had a government that was a little more pragmatic, and that, as a friend of mine once said very carefully, that cares more about Palestinians than about the Palestinian cause.
Well, it's not just, I would just like to end by saying they'll have a better future, not if their leaders care about their well-being. No, they'll have a better future if they are not educated to want to massacre Jews and Christians and Muslim infidels. Otherwise, it doesn't matter who's leading them. They will have a crappy life as long as they continue to espouse that Islamist ideology. And that is where that remains to be seen. There needs to be such an overhaul that I don't think you and I are going to see that in our lifetime, because the school books and everything all over the Middle East, but also in the Palestinian Authority, if they're raised that way, they will continue to vote for the terrorists, who then, of course, subjugate them. But without changing their own mind frame, okay? Don't believe that the Gazans are just all these poor, innocent people who are subjugated by their leaders, which they are, by the way. And the trouble is that you have to, not you, they have to deprogram themselves from the ideology that put them there.
I agree with that 100%. I think with demilitarization of Gaza, you've got to talk about de-radicalization. You can't have peace as long as people have been killed, that there should be a holy jihad. I agree with that 100%. And I think maybe, just maybe, when this is all over and the people of Gaza see what Hamas brought upon them, the death and destruction and everything that's gone on, maybe that can form the basis of an effective demilitarization, but the jury is still out, I agree. Until next week, Ruthie.
Looking forward to it, Mark.